So I'm here once again to read something out. This time it is my English homeworks, which I enjoyed writing and I like to write, and yes, just have it. First one is from a topic about America and their slavery, out of the perspective of the daughter of a slave owner. Dear Diary, I'm delighted to declare that I must not complain about the same variety of things I had to mention yesterday. My state of mind is in good condition, and so is my physical, even though today has been particularly activity-loaded. When Mother sent Clothy to awaken me this morning, there had already been prepared an excellent breakfast of bacon and eggs. Clothy was now serving me from a wooden dinner plate, so that I didn't have to stand up to feast. Father had been up early and rode away with Hopkins to repair a broken fence, as Clothy told me. Following my meal was a bath that had been prepared for me by Keisha under the oversight of Mother, so that I would be clean for today's lessons. When the soap had been washed off, I clothed myself with a white dress Clothy had already laid out for me after I demanded this specific piece. After my morning preparations, I walked into the dining room, where Mother enjoyed her breakfast and read the newspaper. What she explained to me was that a group of N-words were misbehaving, but he had been caught and controlled by the overseer. She refused to grant me any more information, even though I begged for it out of own interest. I even saw the excitement in Clothy's and others. Our mate had then stepped forward to kindly ask for the circumstances, but was immediately told to mind her own business instead of questioning unrightful rioters, stepping out of their line on the field. Luckily, our harvesters always stayed in their place and sang the work songs. Father had always told me how they were enjoying their assignments, because no one would ever get the insane idea of complaining for being given a function in their otherwise meaningless life. What poor creatures. I'm wondering what could have upset and misled those others enough to do bad things against their own good. But as I know, they often don't understand their own situation in the entirety, and thereby tend to mindlessly react in not understandable ways. Being underdeveloped has to be so hard. I am glad we can help them with finding their way, even though they don't understand it themselves. Poor things. After receiving my tasks, I walked into the studying room, where the teacher and William already awaited me for my writing lesson. Facing the strong summer sun, the air was boiling me inside. Luckily, I had Clothy to defend my ever-rising temperature from the burning heat waves with the usual great grass fan. Whenever the cool breeze was too less to really be refreshing, so that I could concentrate on my studying, I advised Clothy to increase the waving speed. I cannot comprehend how she did not notice the lack of coolness by herself, for this is her only profession and she is usually looking really concentrated. When she respected my wish and kept waving to the degree where she told me, I can do it faster. I sadly was not allowed to get a second fan because there were no N-words to spare in such a busy household, which meant to sweatingly continue the lesson until the lecture was finally over and the mentor declared I had earned enough knowledge for today. I instantly began with my homework as Mother taught me to. While writing the same sentences over and over to learn it, I could already smell our kitchen personnel preparing us delicious soup for lunch. I'm often wondering how someone barely able to properly swing a fan could prepare such astonishing dishes. I addressed this during the consumption of mentioned soup, but Mother assured me about their inability to create any decent food without her supervision. Otherwise, they would not be eating such rubbish for themselves, she told me. I realized that the usual meals of our personnel were completely unknown to me, so I respectfully asked Clothy what they tend to eat. Mostly lard, cornmeals or molasses. If we're lucky, we might get your leftovers, was her reply, and after poorly explaining lard and molasses to me, I well understood why they liked our leftovers so much. It seemed like they truly are unable to make an even consumable meal on their own. Father and Hopkins took me for a ride after lunch. I sat on my beautiful, beloved white horse I named Snowflake. Only one time had I seen snow in my life, on a long trip to the astonishing but also freezing north in New England. Even our carriage had been as cold as 100 fans must be. Trotting through the hot air to the farms, behind Father and Hopkins, I wished to be back in this snowy carriage. Clotty was jogging behind us with Fathers and Hopkins, carrying our provisions, just like they used to walk behind the carriage last winter. Fortunately, their visibly different and stronger skin seems to probably protect them against those harsh conditions. Never have I heard about an N-word collapsing under the heat, like it tragically happened to me and Mother before. When the galloping horses started to slow down in vision of the crowded cotton, what else, right? Field, the steps on the sandy road have already been inaudible. This close to the farm, all I heard as always, were the long, mournful sounds of workers singing deep out of their lungs. The so-called caller called out, "Let the Lord lead you home." Then all the others would answer in the choir, "What is home is unknown to me. Let the Lord guide your way. Oh, which way will I take?" And so on and so forth, working up and down the fields. As we approached, the overseer blew into his horn 2 times, on which the singing stopped immediately, and the row of workers silently continued to 1. Spot cotton, 2. Pick cotton, 3. Put the picked cotton into the baskets, and repeat. They did not complain, just as Father always said. It must have been simple enough for them to understand, even though some other were always walking behind the first row and checking for any missed cotton. This was one of the first days of cotton harvesting this year, and Father will spend caring about these fields for another estimated 5 weeks or more. I hope the work is not too stressful for him. The harvested cotton can later be turned into beautiful clothes like yours," Father said, and felt the textile of my dress. "And their clothes?" I asked, and looked at Clotty's outworn, but compared to the ripped shreds of the workers, still pleasant clothing. "Oh, theirs as well, of course, and many, many others as well," Hopkins answered. When they both turned to discuss something about production and efficiency with the overseer, which, as I know, is no woman's business, so I went away to pick the few flowers the heat hadn't burned yet. What poor plants left in the burning sun all day, without any ability to escape, no fan and no clothes. To their luck, I kindly rescued them, and Clotty carried them home to put in a sweet vase. As soon as we returned from our journey, where we checked on some other farms in similar ways, the sun set and dinner was waiting for us. The beef was astonishing, but Mother had prepared it herself, so that was no coincidence. She promised me to let Keisha teach me the recipe tomorrow, because she would be occupied in the city. I'm already wondering if she will be able to show me the meal properly, but Mother declared that, as long as I did it, not she, it would be just fine. Then Father went on to talk about an extraordinarily naughty worker who had tried to steal some of our cotton from us. Since it was man's topic, I just shook my head disapprovingly and didn't pay close attention whilst enjoying my food. My stomach was filled and tearing me down into the tiredness, which will soon be tearing me down into my comfortable blankets, when I finished this surprisingly long and over-detailed diary entry. It was fun writing into you, and I hope to see you tomorrow, dear diary. Have a good night. Your Lily. Or your Miss Lily. Yes, that is it, and I enjoyed doing that because I got to research like field hollowers, how are they called again? Field hollers, right. And other things, like, it was not my task, but I just did it, I liked it. And now, one from the next topic, which is, the same topic, but later years, still about not active race segregation in the USA, but, just listen for yourself. The ripped curtains couldn't block out enough light to reach the strived-for level of darkness. The boombox was filling the room with the sound of overheard hip-hop records in a rustling manner through its remaining working speaker. "Overseer, overseer, officer, officer, officer," Carrier's one's voice announced, whilst a real police car with heavily armed and armored cops crossed the dirty and pothole-plastered roads outside. The whirring of an empty fridge came out the kitchen area of the living, dining, cooking and working room. Why the fridge was kept on, considering the unpayable electricity bill, one might wonder. The sheer possibility it could, one day, be filled with delicious food. Hope. A smell descended from the carpet, but it seemed ignorable for now. As long as the music was pumping out of the speaker, everything else would just be a minor setback unless the roof wouldn't break down over their heads. At that thought, Rickard, aka Rick, got up to change the new... Richard. It's not German. At that thought, Richard, aka Rick, got up to change the nearly overfloating bucket and the dripping ceiling. With a recognizable splash, water hit the pavement, representing their front garden. With an unpleasant creak, he closed the window again and reclaimed his worn-out place at the street-found couch. A TV existed, but was barely used. White losers watching reality TV shows to be assured in their social position over other, even greater losers, would have been glad to stare at that screen for hours and hours after their unfulfilling days. However, one couldn't sink lower and got no media representation whatsoever, could not be interested. However, one who could not sink lower and got no media representation whatsoever could not be interested in wasting their remaining energy at the brainless junk displayed through the neighbor's cable abonnement. The house door was audibly closed, and Rick looked to the clock over the kitchen sink. He subtracted the 15 minutes it was off and realized that it could be about time for Charles, aka C, to return. This conjecture was quickly underpinned by loud steps in the building's long staircase. It was home to a variety of African Americans, all paying their rent to the white owner. The bicycle number lock, last instant of protection, clicked open and the flat's door swung open. Charles, in the following referred to as C, came in carrying a countable crowd of carrots. He kicked the door as shut as it would get behind him and threw the carrots into the fridge. "Yo, what's up? I bought some food," he said as he took off his baseball jacket. "Are you crazy, man? What are we going to do with all those carrots?" Rick responded, confused. "What do you think? Eat them, I would suggest." He casually sat down next to Rick in his usual spot. "Well, if that's all you brought, I don't see any alternative." What do you mean, if that's all you brought? You know how hard it is to get A-grade carrots that cheap? Bro, do I look like a fucking bunny to you? Do I look like a money tree to you? Should I bring caviar next time? If you don't mind working a little harder to get anything else than carrots, I would appreciate it. Who actually did something today? Besides, what am I supposed to do if I'm not qualified for anything? I don't know, man. Go clean them dishes down at Fabio's place. Man, Fabio only serves these cheap paper plates nowadays, so there's no cleaning to do. You better get a clean record. You know I was hungry as a starving dog, so were you. But just imagine the life you could have if you actually started searching for a job, man. Don't you want to change that lame-ass bike saddle for a polished leather seat of your new car one day? I've been to the job department 100 times, always telling me, but you need the proper education. They ain't ever given me education. If you hadn't chilled with Dom all that day skipping school, this wouldn't have been a problem. School ain't taught me nothing, and you chilled with Dom as well, and you know when we hung out on that old park bench smoking weed? Oh, good old days, huh? And then you started selling that shit, and look where it has gotten you. You told us who would get us out of that stinking dilapidated neighborhood. Are you planning on achieving anything, Rick? Are you even trying to improve? Or will you just stay on that couch for eternity? Of course I won't. One day I'll sell in a sweet little house with my lady, with you and a nice little river in Upper Michigan. You, in Upper Michigan, by selling your demolished bike to a junkyard? You know that's literally why I'm looking for a job. You think I love to live here in this piece of crap whilst these white dudes are playing golf on their private tennis courts and all? Probably publicly financed as well. They're paying for streets as well. All they're willing to pay for are the police cars rolling over them, keeping us in our gals and raiding honest working Fabio's place. And what you gonna do about it? That's why I'm searching for some good payment. I don't want to drive a fancy car and still have troubles here. Imagine just moving to the north. Peace is all I'm asking for. Keep dreaming, as long as those paychecks ain't coming in. Mr. Charles Williamson, president of the falling apartment, 3rd floor flat, sir, Dr. Charles Luther King Jr. Please. You don't even have the motivation to fix a broken ceiling. You won't live anywhere near Michigan unless you, and now, let me tell you my secret, work for it. Why should I work twice as hard to achieve what the white man gets as soon as he drops out of his mother? Working keeps you alive. That's it. No wealthy future for us. Now I keep you alive, and now get yourself a carrot or go starve in the corner. And whilst your adults turn the music up, I had an exhausting day. And so the sound of a resistingly eaten carrot got drowned in the words of rappers, spitting lines after lines about lines and money and ghettos and chicks, well then both and neither of those, whatever the last line was. Yes. Now one last speech, if I can find it. It is about social media. I enjoyed writing it very much. You have to pretend to be in a classroom now. And yes, so how social media robs our boredom. Social media, we know it. I have to say, like, you cannot see my gestures, which is fairly sad, but I started that speech with putting out my phone and looking down to it, and then waiting until the room was quiet, and then I looked down at my phone again, and then I said, "So can I begin? Can I start?" No, I think I said, oh, wait a second, I'm just scrolling through my Instagram feed or something like that, and then I put my phone down and started the speech. So, how social media robs our boredom. Social media. We know it, we love it, so let's get right into it, shall we? First of all, I would like every one of you to quickly think of a situation you usually use your common apps against boredom. This might include waiting in line, procrastinating your English speech, or on the toilet. Because in this speech I want to briefly dip into the topic of the decreasing boredom and attention span of our generation as social media becomes a filler for every pause we might get. Look, Jaden already zoomed out after one sentence. We're not used to page-long non-fictional texts anymore, and with the absence of exciting melodies and flickering lights, our brains already start to experience the first signs of boredom. No problem, one might think. I'll just watch some TikToks now and Google the answers to my English homework later. But since avoiding any annoying or boring tasks with fun little pictures is usually a decision of our first unreflected thought system, you know, the one that clicks on the accept all cookies button when you enter a new website, it might be worth having a quick argument with ourselves about that particular case. Now, arguments to reach for a phone and start to scroll might include that I can see things I'm interested in. It's fun. If you have other reasons, keep them in mind. You are free to bring them up later. However, it is mostly just decreasing our consciousness to a passive absorber of content. Of course, there are quick thoughts about this and that rushing through our brain, but it's nothing solid, nothing you can grab and nothing you can build upon, since any train of thought is immediately broken with a quick scroll downwards. In my opinion, this is a remarkably interesting state of mind, as one is neither bored nor active nor engaged. If you now think, that is not true, I'm very engaged in my timeline, well, I would ask you to just think of 5 things you came across in the average 2 hours you statistically spent on social media yesterday. What did you do about these? Did you send them to a friend, write a comment? Do you now think, Oh yeah, that was a cool post. I wonder what else could be waiting for me in the depths of my personal entertainment algorithm. Well, I can promise this excitement will flee you before this speech ends. This is not because it's so unbearably long, nor because I'm trying to rob you of your thirst for short-term entertainment, even though I am. It is just self-explanatory, that one will naturally have fewer interest in a 30-second clip than in a beautifully filmed 2-hour movie, an indescribably written under 600-page book, or a 5-season series with an incomprehensibly but captivating plot. Social media is rather a filler than an experience. You don't plan to look at pictures for 2 hours like you do with a movie. Social media's main purpose for you is to avoid boredom at any cost. Social media's main financial purpose is to trap you on their page as long as possible, to create most possible user data they can then sell and show you personalized ads, because you are their product. So even though you just wanted to skip a short waiting period, the page tries to rob as much of your time as possible. Now, think back to your second thought system. With the second thought, you could have avoided unlocking your phone at the first place. Indeed, that comes at the cost of accepting your state of boredom or your responsibility to complete an unsatisfying task. But now imagine what you could do after doing the dishes, if you didn't spend half an hour scrolling before. You would then realize that you now have free time instead of being trapped in a procrastination loop. It is possible for you to implement that time into your schedule with something you will be actually engaged in, like watching one episode of your current favorite show or talk to friends. Do whatever you want to. For the second case, in which you wanted to avoid boredom, a meal without the spice of likes, shares and comments might seem fairly tasteless. But without reaching into the science says phone bad box too deep, studies have shown that boredom will truly enhance your planning skills and creativity, as well as some other things that one Instagram post said, which I really cannot remember right now. Ah yes, memory. It enhances memory as well. While you wait in line for your food on the bus, a brain unstimulated by an ever-flowing picture river is free to naturally think. That might include recapitulating on the previous day and drawing conclusions for the next one. Even though that might seem fairly simple, it's only so that you yourself can recognize your bad habits or behavior. Your smartphone might know you a little too good, but won't try to make you a better person. For the longest time, you will still have to do that on your own. Furthermore, even though blank silence often appears torturing to a mind that, with access to unconsumable data piles refined for the human eye, has lost the feeling of boredom for a long time, it is that silence which will soon turn your very own canvas ready to be filled with a variety which will soon turn into your very own canvas, ready to be filled with a variety of ideas. Creativity is just compensation of an unsatisfying input of entertainment from the outside, which means we have our best ideas when bored, and social media robs us of the necessity to imagine. That does not mean you have to avoid social media as a whole, but my advice is to try to be conscious about your usage. Instead of using it as a filler during tedious periods, you might want to try to schedule a time. If you then find a post you truly are engaged in, don't like it and continue scrolling. Think about it for a short while. Maybe the short absence of content will lead to a good idea. If not, what did you miss? The internet has way too much content to let a couple posts you might not have seen bother you. While writing this speech, I opened Instagram whenever I did not know what to write and was too lazy to think about a fitting continuation of my text. But I did not count because I do not care. Because all social media for me is just my brain. Because all social media is for me is just switching to idle mode with the only purpose of wiping upwards and occasionally double tapping. To later realize that half the day has already passed, and I can barely remember anything I did today, and nothing more than that. Lastly, I hope I did not overstretch your attention span. If so, I will try my best to compress my speech into a 30-second TikTok and double time wrap it to an Eminem beat next time. With that, have a great offline day, read a book or be bored, and I think school might help you with that. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. I have not really written an outro thing because I make that up when I go along. Okay, and that was it, I suppose. Unless there's anything interesting. Oh yes, maybe that. Yeah, oh well, okay. That's from this year. Being British. With no possible doubt, Great Britain is strictly bound to its equally disturbing as well as glorious history. The only constant being the sacred monarchy, reliably gleaming and ruling over the declining empire. When we come to the topic of British culture, I would naturally start off with the days of Shakespeare, theatre specifically designed for the king and elite. This former elite continues to exist in a manner adjusted to the current situation, though still occupying an elaborated position. For this class of people apart from the monarchs, my mind paints a picture of grand houses on the land side, filled with quite wealthy, conservative folks taking part in a gentleman's club and sending their errand boys to long-established institutional schools, filled with offsprings from equally privileged families. Not incomplete, but quite the contrast, exists a group of higher margins, former peasants, industry workers in between, currently occupying their standardized cubicle. At a day that is. The cultural lives are devoted to the dying out pops placed all over the country, as no average elongated house offers a dinner room of acceptable size. The pop is where they enjoy their pint of Guinness and socialize over the small man's hobbies. Sports, for example. However, against the vast difference between those stands in society, the nationality is what unites them in rights and thoughts. To pick up the former empire stretching all over the globe, an undefeatable proudness slumbers in their minds and awakens if their nation is mentioned. As if there was a God-given right for every citizen to enjoy a cup of milk tea and a meal of fish and chips for eternity, Brits come together over their conservatism. Partly rooted in the undeniable prestige of a royal family, partly in their fear to lose their privileges to foreigners, Great Britain Britons decided to cut the European influence. There we have a vivid example on the picture Brits have of themselves, clearly independent and always slightly better than the rest of the world. Clearly, that is not how the entire population of the United Kingdom, but just the traditional Britishness. Today, especially the metropoles of England have partly adapted more progressive mindsets. However, one might argue that that original Brit would not count those positions or behaviors as British. Brits might be observed as utterly polite, but my personal picture is that they are only especially polite to those who they value as equals. There lies the true split. While both bankers and workers can be equally British in their own way, the definition of actual Britishness may value to exclude specific people from outside the UK, or in a more general sense, from outside the mindset of a Brit. And then I have more things about Britishness. Hey, isn't that great? First, Scotland. So there was a presentation of Scotland. I might edit that in later, or I might not. We will see. Scotland. We all know it, well, how do we feel about it? Is it just a characterless extension of England? Let's explore the northern part of Great Britain and its 5,400,000 citizens. To check off the generals first. Even though it occupies about a third of the land area from Great Britain, the population is only roughly about a twelfth of the UK. Most of those people live in the south, where one can find the capital of Edinburgh, with the Scottish Parliament in it, as well as the largest city Glasgow, with about 600,000 citizens. The sparsely populated land side remains, with the untouched Highlands in the north. Scotland only shares one border with England, since it is an island, but it is also in the possession of over 900 smaller islands off the coast, 94 of which are populated. Scotland is famous for its nature and castles, to which we will come in the cultural landmark section. Before that, my partner at this time is going to provide you with some historic background on the kings and dukes reigning from those castles and Scotland as a whole. Here you can see a structure. Now let us commence into the history section. Then there came a lot of history, but you don't really want to know about that, right? You want to know about the cultural traditions, people and landmarks. Now that we have learned why Scotland exists in its current state, you might be curious how Scotland is today. Or you already fell asleep. But guess what? I will continue anyways. At this point, again, there was a student in the class, like I have written that beforehand. And then at the point there was a student in the class, head on the table, eyes wide shut. And yes, I like mocking the audience. Every one of you should be familiar with the stereotypical kilt-wearing, pipe-playing Scotsman from a castle in the Highlands. While those things indeed have their place in the Scottish culture and are common if you focus on traditional events, for example the annual Highland Games, it is as if you only saw the bratwurst-eating, beer-drinking crowds we are on the Oktoberfest. As a quick side note, there is a Scottish language called Scottish Gaelic which expanded to Scotland from Ireland. However, the number of fluent speakers is marginal, with only 1% of the population, mainly concentrated in the more remote areas of the country. While we're at it, you would want to call a Scot Scot and Scottish, so Scottish Scot, never Scotch, since this is only their whiskey. They do not enjoy being called Scotch. They do, however, definitely enjoy their Scotch. Even though I don't want to encourage underage drinking, and only catch your attention with this intriguing topic, one cannot deny that alcohol is a part of Scotland, and there are in fact the biggest worldwide producers of mentioned whiskey. Gin is highly common as well, and beer can be found in loads. If there's one modernly relevant prejudice on Scots, it is that they are heavy drinkers. I'm drifting off into a Scottish accent. I know. Statistically speaking, the overall average adult Scot drinks 18 units of alcohol per week, which equals half a litre of whiskey or Scotch. Do keep in mind that's only the average. Unsurprisingly, the generally friendly Scots do like to party and might invite you into their home for a beer even though you just met. Kind and open people, the Scottish. So, what are we gonna do with the drunken sailor? Send them out to the seas. Fishing is a wildly common profession on the coast, since Scotland is just as much of a seafaring nation as England, and some time ago they even built more ships for the crown than England. However, to transition people from people to culture, with that much blood alcohol, people must have gotten the most nonsensical ideas. It is so that the thing you might only know from England evolved. I'm convinced you all are aware of Stonehenge, otherwise the English teachers must have done a terrible job. Similar, though less known structures are scattered all over Scotland. Some are significantly older as well. They even got those giant standing stones out to the islands, and those things are heavier than their alcohol consumption. But jokes aside, the meaning and purpose of Stonehenge is yet to be found, and the Scottish were always myth-obsessed folks. With such a beautiful landscape, their woods, hills, rivers and lakes, one's mind must flourish with fantastical ideas, and they actually have a legend for all their woods, hills, rivers and lakes. Certainly, you know Loch Ness with its famous monster Nessie. There are more unknown legends as well, which I can only promote, though we don't have the time to discuss them right now. A few interesting names are Fingal's Cave, Corryraken Whirlpool, the Nine Maidens of Dundee, the Stirworm, the Ghost Piper of Clonyard Bay, the Gorbals Vampire, and Robert the Bruce and the Spider. This leaves out all the mystical man-made structures, especially castles, and oh boy do they have those. There are about 1,500 castles in Scotland. That's a list that would exceed the time for our entire presentation. Sadly, the Hogwarts castle is not a real castle, even though the story from Harry Potter would fit into the mystical Highlands. Which types of castles are included though are ruins and haunted castles, which remain to look gorgeous, castles that are still from the monarchs or private owned. Just imagine to live in your own bloody castle, and of course, public castles you can visit. Which leads us to landmarks, and I will try to keep it short here. I don't want to bore you more than necessary. The most interesting, and it's not going to get more specific than that, are a variety of different castles, with the Edinburgh Castle as most popular, a collection of museums and art galleries, and the generally beautiful nature as well as parks. I would advise you to inform yourself in case you truly are interested in those landmarks. So make sure to pay them a visit and avoid the countless alcohol distillery tours you could get instead. And then came Lotte with politics. Yes, that is it for that. I have one more speech, but I don't think I want to read that out. So, yes, that was it. Thank you for listening. But I don't actually give a fuck. Goodbye.